of it and
Yes.
teach remote. Okay.
As chair of the Southampton School Board, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that we are utilizing Zoom for this electronic meeting. All members of the Southampton School Board have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through this platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen and, if necessary, participate in this meeting through dialing the following phone number: 646-876-9923 and webinar ID 849-5069-0782, or by clicking on the website address which is listed on the agenda. We previously gave notice to the public the necessary information for accessing this meeting, including how to access the meeting using Zoom or telephonically. Instructions have also been provided on the website of SAU21 at www.sau21.org. If anybody has a problem, please call 603-926-8992, extension 103, or email at revans@sau21.org. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that all votes that are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law.
Jim Keim.
Present and alone.
Rebecca Burdick.
Present and alone at the time.
Sharon Gordon.
Present and alone.
I have the roll call taken.
Great, thank you. So next on the agenda is the 2021-22 budget overview. I think we can start with probably the slides, or we have the principal narrative in here too. I don't know how we want to start it, but I think we are going to need to get into some of the pages in this one, given some of the significant cost proposals here.
Yeah, so I think that's right, Jim. It makes I personally think it makes sense to go through the PowerPoint first, and then delve into some of the budget pages that warrant some more discussion. I mean, because the bulk of this budget is very straightforward. I mean, I think you're all aware that, I mean, we have an existing lean budget, and if you go through, there's we looked at every possible area to cut considering the economic climate we're in. And we have two main investments that we're looking at for this year, and that's really that, and that reflects a modest increase, and then the rest of the increase is contractual. So I trust that everyone has spent a decent amount of time reviewing the documents, but just so that everyone's aware. We did include all the budget materials in board docs. That includes the PowerPoint, an Excel that has every line item for each account, as well as historicals. We have our enrollment numbers. We have the actual budget pages with narrative for each account. Our warrant articles, estimated revenues, as well as some supplemental information, including our expendable trusts, federal grants, historical salary increases, as well as our salary schedules. So if it's okay with you, Jim, I can start with the PowerPoint, and then we can jump to the worksheet as we go, or we can just wait to the end and then go into specific pages.
Yeah, that works. Let's start.
All right, great. Thank you. All right, so let everyone see my screen.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, thanks. So as you're all aware, when we develop a budget, we're looking to allocate our resources to align with our goals, and to essentially provide an operation of our school, to provide a good education for our students based upon the school Barnard School's vision. So that with that in mind, we have a number of stated goals in that align with that vision. And much of this, has been pretty consistent with prior years. We're looking to really emphasize social emotional learning. So that's both programming as well as supports. Now, I will note where we have had social emotional learning as a goal in prior years, and that has been a point of emphasis, we haven't necessarily made an investment to that end. So this budget includes an investment, as I'm sure you've all seen, because that is severely lacking, and it's something that we feel is the highest priority as we transition from COVID into the next school year, and ongoing. It's social emotional. I think we're all aware of the importance of SEL in a normal school year. Never mind our current situation. Additionally, we're continuing with our CBE initiative. So that's competency-based education. And that implementation. There's really not a defined investment there, other than continued professional learning for our teachers and in-service work to continue that initiative. Additionally, we're looking to foster and really promote that culture of community that Southampton values, and is really what makes Southampton and the Barnard School so special. And then finally, to implement a multi-tiered system of support for students, both academically and socially and emotionally. The idea of a multi-tiered system of support is to support not only students with who have challenges, but also to provide opportunity for students that may have maybe at a higher level, that and offer them some, whether it's services, programming, etc. So that moves into the two areas of focus for this budget. So I'll tell you, this process was difficult, and we'll get into the difficulties a little further along in this presentation. However, we faced some obstacles with some contractual and legally mandated costs that we're facing next year. So any discretionary account, any area that we could make a reduction, even when we couldn't make a reduction, but we felt that we had to make a reduction in order to bring the budget down, we did, because we really felt that these two areas, social emotional learning and our math program, were two essential areas that we needed to address now. We are looking to increase our SEL programming, and that entails increasing the guidance counselor from a 0.5 to a full-time position. So there's a cost associated there. And then the adoption of a robust math program that really aligns with Common Core and supports our teaching and provides our students with meaningful learning opportunities. Now, I'll tell you, so our current math program is we are due for an investment. I mean, this program needs to be replaced regardless, whether it's continuing what we have or a new program. I will say that what we have currently is not sufficient. It does not meet the needs of our school. We do have a math committee that looked into this program, and they've identified multiple deficiencies in our current program, and really there is a strong need to upgrade. So when developing a budget, as you all know, enrollment is a key factor. With whether it's increasing or decreasing enrollment, that shapes how we budget. It affects many of these accounts that are variable. When we're looking at staffing, this is an important item. Luckily we have not reached an inflection point where we need to add teachers, but we are seeing an increase. And if you recall the enrollment projections that we contracted in 2017, there was a projection that in the next couple of years, we will reach actually over 100 students. And actually these numbers align, other than this year, the numbers the last couple of years have aligned exactly how those enrollment projections have indicated. And we fully anticipate that, further out, we will get to that in that 100 student range. I will also note that we will be conducting a refreshed enrollment projections study this coming fall of 2021. That was slated to be done this year. However, due to the pandemic, the data is not sufficient to provide accurate projections. So we pushed it off. We deferred it a year so that we can have some better data and get those projections. So that'll give a good idea, because 2017 is, that is a number of years old. So it'll be interesting to see what those projections look like as we move forward, and it'd be great if we continue this trend, because it's great to have students in the school. Similarly, we are also interested from a financial standpoint at our high school enrollment. As you know, we tuition our students, and now we tuition them to Amesbury and Winnicott. And as I'm sure you saw in the budget, we had, there's no cost differential, but we have a high percentage of incoming ninth graders who intend to go to Winnicott as opposed to Amesbury. So it'll be interesting to see if that's a one-year blip or if that trend continues. But I believe it was, I want to say 8 going to Winnicott and 1 going to Amesbury as of today. That can change, obviously. So that's a pretty, that was a surprising result. But that's something that I think we're all happy that we were able to provide that option so that families can choose which high school for their students to attend. So that's thanks to the hard work of Dr. Lupini and cooperation between the Southampton and Winnicott boards, that we were finally able to come to that agreement. But as you
can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Where did you get that information about the number of students that were intending to go to Winnicott versus Amesbury? So you're talking about the current 8th grade class?
Yeah, Michelle, how did you gather that data?
Teachers were just asking. I think that it was like six. I think it was 6 and 1, and then 1 uncertain. Just during conferences, they just casually asked people if what they were thinking, just to get an idea. It's
Okay.
preliminary.
Yeah,
It might not be. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, and this was, September timeframe, so things change. And granted, that's a student's perspective, so that may not be what the family decides. But it's an interesting that we're receiving that type of feedback. Luckily, from a budget perspective, there's no differential, so it doesn't matter from our perspective whether they attend Winnacunnet or Amesbury. It's the same tuition. So, but you'll see that over the next couple of years, we do have a fairly steady enrollment stream. The way the numbers work, because there are some fluctuations with classes, but it just so happens that when a large class comes in, a large class graduates, to a certain degree, but it's within a few students each year. So that's a good thing from a budget perspective, because that doesn't create large variances and fluctuations from a budgeting perspective. So
I didn't really focus on this in the when I went through the pages. Any of the students expecting or showing interest in SST that we know about?
I think we have one that we're aware of.
And that isn't generally a 9th grade issue, or it isn't a 9th grade issue.
Yes.
That wouldn't hit you till either 10th and 11th grade or 11th and 12th grade.
Yeah, it's a good point. Thanks, Bill.
That's a maximum 2-year hit. And it's currently SST tuition is approximately $3,500 per student. So that would be on top of the Winnacunnet tuition. And it's in line with, now that the Winnacunnet tuition is aligned with Amesbury, that actually brings it in line with what it would have cost at Whittier. I know the last year of Whittier, we were paying about $16,000. So that would have actually been more because that would have been like a fourth. At that point, Amesbury was about $12,000. So it was about a $4,000 differential. So.
Do you see that maybe Amesbury that option is going to dissolve?
The option to attend Amesbury High School?
Yeah. Do you think that will, because
That'll be driven by. Go ahead, Matt. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say that I think that would really be a community decision. I think we want to provide. Seeing as how we're a tuition agreement, I personally feel like it's good to provide options.
okay.
So.
There's no incentive for them. The superintendent had called me, the superintendent who recently left had called me a number of times during the time that you were talking to Winnacunnet. They were concerned because they've come to depend in many ways on that revenue. And so I don't see them, even if these preliminary numbers of what your current 8th grade might do, it's come out to be the case. I don't see them saying, well, we want to back out of that deal. And there's no incentive for you to back out of the deal. It's good to be able to give your families a choice of either high school. So I think it would be some number of years before they might raise it as a problem.
You think even if, only 2 or 3 kids attend, you don't think that they'll still say, all right, this just doesn't seem to be
Well,
worth
it's
it?
incremental revenue for them, no matter how many students they receive.
Okay.
It's really, there's no real cost at these numbers. So it would be somewhat foolish to not allow our students to attend. Now, the question is, do they try to raise the tuition rate?
Yeah.
Right.
So that's a potential risk factor, which at that point we will have to address.
Although,
Yeah,
Matt,
we-
I recall their tuition rate is somewhat tied to that state calculation of per student spending, and they don't spend much. I mean, let's just be honest. So they would really have to go back in and sharpen their pencils and try to reconfigure that in a very different way. Or am I wrong about what sort of the basis?
No, you're absolutely right. So under our current contract, so it would really be upon, ending the current contract would be an issue. It'd be where we'd have an issue. So
Yeah.
under the current contract, it's purely a percent increase based on their budget increase. So actually for this budget where, we don't have, they won't have their budget increase until, probably later this month, or an estimate. So we're assuming we're assuming no increase because Massachusetts schools, they're getting hit by this
Yeah.
economic
Yeah.
crisis more so than New Hampshire, just because of their funding source. So they're funded primarily or in larger part from the state. So they're going to see, and then they're going to see likely see lower revenue, both locally and statewide. So we'll see, but it's we're making an assumption that there will not be an increase. So. Any other questions in regard to high school? All right, so we are proposing an operating budget of $2,793,940, which is a 9.98% increase, which is $253,429,000 over last year's budget. So this is a substantial budget increase. This is our proposed budget increase. This is larger than most years. That being said, it's only just over $63,000 or 2.33% higher than the default budget. So as you can see, the actual increase is rather modest, because as you know, the default budget is the prior year's budget plus or minus any contractual or legally mandated items. So that's indicative of the fact that our increases are contractual and legally mandated. Our actual variable discretionary increases are only $63,000 or 2.33%. That's not to say that 9.98 isn't a substantial increase, but just to put it in perspective, I think that really shows how, how I want to say fiscally responsible this budget is, because that increase entails is essentially those two items those two goals, school goals that I mentioned earlier. Social emotional learning and math programming. So that's a guidance counselor and a new math program. Otherwise, we have no increase. They're all cuts, and I think you see that through the budget. Budgeting is an exercise in priorities, and those are our two main priorities. And we may have sacrificed elsewhere, but that's what we want to convey to the board is how important those two items are. So just to go into a little more detail on what the budget drivers were, the contractually and legally mandated items were retirement, which is an increase of $43,101. So the state of New Hampshire decided this was a good year to increase the employer contribution for the retirement system for all teachers and staff by 3.22% for teachers and 2.89% for employees. This isn't just SAU 21. This is statewide. This is for all this. You're going to see this in every budget. So your town budget for police, fire, all municipal employees, they're seeing these similar increases. And this is a budget killer. $43,000. That's essentially the. I mean, that's a from a percentage standpoint, that's at least that's about 1%.
Almost 2.
2%, yeah. So that's difficult to swallow. Unfortunately, the state, that's an unfunded pension obligation, decades in the making. It's kind of something that the state's pushed down the road, and now they're trying to fund that obligation. Similarly, our special education is increasing by $53,353. Again, this is based on student need. We have an out of district placement that's driving a large part of this increase, but these are based on services for students with special needs based on their IEP. Health insurance is increasing by $53,537. So the actual increase to health insurance is actually more than that. It's about $10,000 more, but I removed the guidance counselor package because as part of that investment, that guidance counselor will gain health insurance. So I want to give you a real number as to what that increase is for health insurance with the guidance counselor kind of out of the picture. So this is what it is, just based on the 3.4% guaranteed maximum rate. So that's for our premium increase, as well as our staffing. Any staffing changes or any election changes that staffs make. So if a teacher has a child and goes to a family plan, or gets married and goes to a 2-person plan, that can drive increases. So that's a substantial increase that's out of our control. And then finally, we do have salary increases of $36,822 for our based on our collective bargaining agreement for our certified staff teachers. This is based on the CBA. That was 4-year CBA that was passed a number of years ago, and includes a 2.75% cost of living adjustment and step increases. So those 4 items are really the bulk of the budget increase. So the two budget increases that are discretionary, although I don't think Michelle would say they're discretionary. I think she would say that these are essential. Are the aforementioned, and I've mentioned this a few times, the guidance counselor and the math program. So this represents those 2 increases, which, as you'll see, it's actually more than the differential with the default budget. So the default, we are 63,000 over the default budget, and these 2 items alone are 67,000, almost $68,000. So I think that's pretty. That tells a good story about everywhere else in the budget is cut. So this involves increasing our guidance counselor position from a half-time position to a full-time position. This has been identified as a critical need to implement our SEL programming. This person it's really necessary for them to model, to coach, and consult with our teachers in order to get that program up and running, and then to maintain it and continue it with integrity and with fidelity. And then obviously this is kind of probably a 2 to 3 year span, but for a short-term piece, there's also the COVID circumstances. So, obviously we are fortunate to be in school, but that does not minimize the effect on our students' mental and behavioral health directly related to COVID. And the idea that this will go back to normal once we're our operations are normal in the fall, is just not, we'd be putting our heads in the sand. There is some at least a couple year effect that we really do need to address, specific to COVID. And then just from an ongoing SEL programming perspective, this is just a critical need. We did offset some costs by eliminating the home school coordinator, so that will be absorbed into this position, as well as reducing some of our behavioral specialist positions. We also eliminated an educational associate to try to offset these costs. The math program, so that's the actual program is being vetted by the math committee, but the bottom line is that our current program does not meet the standards necessary as far as rigor, as far as providing critical thinking and problem solving skills. It's just deficient in a number of areas. So they have identified a few programs, and our intent is to implement that next year, and that also entails some professional development for our team. It's not just the program; it also includes professional development and training for our staff. Michelle, do you want to speak to either of these two items? Because I know you are passionate about both of them.
Sure, thanks. I just want to address what you said is great, Matt. I agree. It is important. We are trying to implement this SEL program in the school that is at tier 1. All students have access to it, which is critical to development of the whole child. We also have students, this guidance counselor also services students who are in special education through IEPs and 504s, and that's taking up a lot of her time as well. But we also have these students that are like in between who really need some services, and we aren't able to provide them they could use these services, but right now we can't provide them because she's not here enough. And one of the goals that we have just from doing, when I started here, I interviewed with all the staff and parents and teachers. And one, glaring thing that stood out to me was that we do have a lot of students who are in tier 1 and they end up going right to special education. And there isn't really anything that's to support these students in this tier 2 in between. And I really think that we will end up saving money in the end by having this guidance counselor here full time, because she will be able to provide those services for those students that will keep them out of special education. Not to mention just that these students really need these supports. And so there is a piece of it that is related to COVID, but there is a piece that isn't related to COVID, whether there was COVID or not. We still have this set of students who really need those extra supports. And I just think it would be a good investment for the district to invest in a full-time counselor. I think in the long run, it'll end up saving money in the end in your special education cost. And as far as the math program, the current program is just an older program that it doesn't have, like Matt said, doesn't have the rigor and the skills that today's students really need. And so we have a math committee that's looking, we've narrowed it down to 4 different programs. And so this cost would cover that program, as well as training for teachers, for professional development training. That's one thing that was missing in the program that they're using now. They never received any training in the program either. So I think it's a glaring need as well. And I think that we're going to have to adopt something anyway. And I would rather invest in something that we're going to use in the long run than just to put a Band-Aid on it.
Michelle, that's really well said. Matt, can I add just a couple thoughts to support what Michelle has said?
Of course.
So, Michelle, that's really, really well said. So, most of the board members know I had some experience in a district that was growing like mad, and we were asked for all kinds of evidence and support around, building more schools and that kind of thing. And one of the things that we were asked at one time was, could you provide us with the basics of a school and what you need in a school, whether there's 25 kids or 2,500 kids, right? So you need a principal, you need certain facilities, things, whatever. And part of this because you've been through it. Two of the things that were absolutely positively on that list were a nurse and a guidance counselor, full-time. Whether you have 25 kids or whether you have 2,500 kids, you need to start with that one. And there's lots of research to support that, particularly now. And the second part of what I wanted to say is really tied to that. Again, some of you know I did some work with a place called the Collins Center where we were brought in to look at some districts that had budget problems. And what they had done in response to those budget problems is they had to make reductions. So they naturally went to educators who were not classroom teachers. And so they cut math specialists, they cut literacy specialists, they cut guidance counselors, and they were shocked, shouldn't have been, but they were shocked to see that their special education costs went up. Because if you don't have those tier 2 supports that Michelle's talking about, then you will have, you absolutely, parents will find their support somewhere, and they'll find it in that legal document called an IEP. Whereas if you can provide some of those things in regular education, you won't see people, you won't see those numbers of IEPs, and there's lots and lots of research and data to support that. So these are really good recommendations, and the guidance counselor one in particular, I just wanted to support Michelle on because it really resonates on multiple levels. If you're worried about your kids and their social emotional health, you'd be in favor of that. If you're worried about your budget and special education costs down the line, this is something you should be able to get behind as well. So thanks.
Yeah, I have a couple questions on both of them. And I think it's going to be something that gets highlighted, when we get down and down the road here. Clearly there's going to be questions on these, so let's start to flush them out now. So on the guidance counselor side, I guess the first question I have is right now it's a 0.5 and it's moving it to a 1. In the budget, we had it at was it a 0.2?
Yeah, so what we did was we cobbled together an increase to a 0.5 this year because we utilized grant funding and we moved this home to school coordinator into that position so that we were able to kind of combine it into a 0.5. So the actual budget from last year, I think was a 0.2. You're right, but we kind of combined these roles to make it into a 0.5 this year.
Okay, and then at what point does the benefits kick in? Is it when you go over 0.5 or is it
0.8?
0.8? Okay.
Yep.
And what's the cost associated with that? Is it like around 10 grand or more than that?
It's about 10 grand for the health, and it's a budget assumption, obviously, because but knowing who the actual person is, we can make a pretty accurate guess in this case. So it's actually so about 10 grand, and then you add about, you have a little bit for dental, and it's incremental with retirement and FICA. So there's a percentage. So if retirement is 20%, so every dollar you're adding $1.20, and then FICA it's 7.65. So it's really for every dollar you add, it's $1.2765 thereabouts. So
okay. And of the 55,000, that number includes all the offsets. Is that correct? All the the reduction of the
correct
elimination of the educate. Okay.
Yeah. So if you drop it down to 0.8, it's going to be about $15,000 lower. So it's not a big savings, but it's but it would be a savings, obviously. So.
And then this is not my specialty at all, but just to understand how, Michelle, how you would see this kind of playing out within the school. And I understand like over time you would expect to see better and better results, but would you expect to see kids coming off an IEP and kind of heading back into a tier 2, if I'm getting the terminology correct, tier 2 type of scenario, or would that be more as kids come into school, they kind of go through that process? How would you see that unfolding?
So, so she's obligated to service the students on IEPs right now, but having her here full time will allow us to provide supports. There are students who are just like, they haven't quite they're not qualifying for IEPs, but they need support services. And she can provide that service to get them back into the classroom so that they don't go to special education. Right now, the way the system is set up, the students that are struggling, there's not really an option for them. So they end up going to special education to get their services.
So we wouldn't expect to see kids, existing students, come off the IEPs and get back in the classroom, or would it be more as kids come through? I guess I'm just not clear.
It's possible. I mean, if a student meets their goals, they can come off of the IEP, and then she could provide support, tier 2 support for those students. But I think in the long run, where you're going to see the difference is you're going to see a lot more students getting picked up for tier 2 supports, and she, helps them and gets them back into the regular classroom and prevents these students from getting referred to special education.
And I can add to that too, as far as, to your question, Jim, students getting off IEPs, when students have access to their related services, such as counseling and, a full-time counselor, they're getting better access to the curriculum, and that's the purpose of the related services. So it is possible that having a counselor full-time will give more students access to the curriculum and then meeting their goals, and therefore no longer needing an IEP. So over time, yes, I think given the current time of the counselor at Barnard, it's not looking that way. So it's much less likely that students would get off the IEP because the guidance counselor is only there so many days, and because they're lacking the tier 2, if that makes sense.
That does, yeah. And that's hearing it, that's what it sounds like. Was there any consideration just moving it to a 0.8? Just to kind of lessen the budget impact?
Yes, we did consider it, but we do have a really big need for it. Not only just the tier 2 part, but also the tier 1 part. We're really trying to implement this social emotional curriculum to help our students, all of our students. She's been critical in doing that. That's taking up a lot of time. She provides the teaching for this and the modeling for teachers. And then in order to provide, and then she's doing the special education piece that would take up most of her 0.8 time. And then that doesn't provide a lot of time for the tier 2 support, which is what we feel like is really missing the most right now.
Yeah, I guess it's when I think about like getting a budget through voting, especially in a year where we have significant increases that are really non-discretionary. That might be a way to do it where it's multiple steps, where you move up but it's not as big of a financial impact. And then maybe 2 years out, you move it to more of a full-time position. I guess I expect pushback from the town on this. I think they're going to look at the big number first, and they're really not going to dive into the details. And then this is going to be something that is potentially attacked, just given, I think, some of the experiences I've seen in the past. We typically have a very supportive town, but this is a big budget increase year. So I think we just need to be aware of the potential for pushback here.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Do you think that a lot of this stems from the current situation that we're in with how kids are at school right now? Or do you just think that it's kind of like the new norm? Maybe I don't want to say norm, but is, you know?
Well, SCL has been a goal for a number of years. We just haven't addressed it. So this is addressing it. So this, I mean, that COVID is a small piece of it, but as Michelle spoke to so eloquently, and Bill, you know, this is how we implement SEL programming. This is how we address tier 2. This helps our long term from a special education cost perspective. This is something that we would be looking at regardless of COVID, but COVID certainly exasperates it.
I think,
Okay.
Becky, if I can answer this too, is prior to COVID, this has been an issue, not just here or in New Hampshire, just nationwide. We have so many students that have these, you know, social emotional issues, and they have trauma in their lives. And it's become sort of a new thing in schools, only because we've seen this increased number of students coming to us that have issues that need to be addressed nationwide. So, and it was happening before COVID.
We also have information as far as when the counselor is not at school, that the students are going to the nurse. So they have those emotional needs and they're going to the nurse. Then I think she actually has data on that if the board's interested, as far as how many students are going to her, the increase of number of students who go to the nurse for nurse appointments versus days when the counselor is in the building. So the need is there regardless, but it's inundating the nurse when the counselor is not in the building.
Hey, Jim, I completely understand. I mean, we spent the time that we talked with Michelle on all these issues and what it would take to sort of scale this up and all of those kinds of things. And again, may not necessarily happen at your school, but on average, here's what we saw in a number of those studies. You will increase the time of the guidance counselor over time, whether you want to or not, because as the guidance counselor gets written into IEPs, it'll demand that time goes up. And what we found is that districts that were more proactive and provided that guidance support in terms of regular education interventions, tier 2, as Michelle has described, that they actually better control their costs over time, because those services don't necessarily get written into an IEP, and you don't end up with special education percentages, which are considerably, I believe in your school's case, above the state averages.
Yeah, no, I'm fully in support
I know you are.
of adding this. I don't want to get it wrong. I just want to make sure it gets passed. So, you know, that's where I'm coming from. And so I was trying to think of ways where that isn't, especially if we weren't seeing increases across other aspects, especially, I mean, we have a big special ed bump this year. And I think it'd be very easy to kind of get it through. I'm concerned with, you know, I'm just under a 10% increase to the overall budget in this environment, that we're going to get some real pushback regardless. So
Jim, are you more concerned
that's
about
where I'm coming from.
Oh, sorry. Are you more concerned about the budget committee or the deliberative session?
I'm a little concerned about everything with regard to that. You know, I highlighted a couple months ago just to the budget committee that we would expect to see some cost increases. I think they were kind of focusing more on this year, where I was trying to maybe highlight it that could be a little bit longer term. You know, and just that the ramifications of all of this is gonna kind of play out, and we'll see where things shake out. But I did highlight it. But I know those guys, right? I mean, they're going to be laser focused on this. Yep. So yeah, I just want to make sure. I think things that we should consider and ways to articulate it are, when I hear this, it sounds like, all right, we make the investment up front. Over time, we would expect to see less of an impact to our special education costs. I think being able to quantify that, and I know you did that in the notes, is by, there's some studies, it was like 11 times present value. But I think we probably, from a presentation perspective, want to be enhance our case here, showing what percentages Barnard is compared to the state. I think state's around 14%. We're much higher, like in the mid 20s, right? Something like that, if not even higher. And kind of just putting some just basic assumptions, not to say we get down to 14% or the average, but just for every, taking a look at things to be able to demonstrate the potential for cost savings long term will go a long way. Because I will say, from the budget committee's side and just in past talks, special education costs are always increasing, and they're always kind of something that's very difficult for them to get their hands around. So I think this just is something we probably can we need to have a pretty good picture to paint when we talk to them, just about what the potential for savings here. I agree with the theory, and I agree with the concept. I do question if it should be done in 2 steps or just one big step, and kind of what the cost implications would be. Now, you may tell me if we go to 0.8, then we have to keep the educational assistant, so it's not worth it anyways. But that's something that would be good to kind of flush out a little more. So that's just my concerns, just to
I just add that the special ed budget really was cut this year, except for this out of district placement, which was,
yeah.
I mean, we cut, an EA, we cut the evaluation costs. And I know on paper it comes out as a huge increase, but we had no control over that.
Yes, I recognize that. On 100, I mean, you have one student that's costing, it looks like 80 plus transportation, right? There's been an increase, so it's pretty close to 100,000, just under. But unfortunately, the overall number is something that we're going to have to walk them through that in order and to justify some of it. So on the math program, just to move on from this, is that so right now there's a math program for elementary and then there's one for middle school, correct? So would this replace all of that, or is it just,
So we're looking to replace the K-5, definitely. Maybe we might do K-6. Our current middle school curriculum, the math teacher really likes that curriculum, and she's had a lot of success, and she had some training this summer with it as well. And it's also the program that Seabrook is using. So we most likely will keep the middle school math program.
Okay. Yeah, I don't see any issue with the math program being changed, that is. Yeah, I think that would be very easy to I don't think we'll get much pushback on that at all.
Well, I'll work with Michelle and Caroline, and we can put together a more compelling kind of numbers focused potential savings data that we could kind of build out on this slide and try to make it a little more clear, and why it's so important. So I particularly with this type of format with a big paragraph, are they going to read through this entire paragraph? Possibly not. So I think we can do some formatting and some better presentation to try to sell it a little better. So to your point.
Yeah, I kind of think of it similar to the nurse conversation, which was a number of years ago, which is funny because, you know, the school couldn't have opened this year without a full-time nurse, right? But back, if you go back a couple of years ago, that was a big kind of issue within at least the people in town that I talked to. Was like, why do we need this? Is, you know, so yeah, I think just being able to kind of make that a little bit more robust and show a multi-year approach would be a little more compelling.
And
Good
maybe
idea.
if the data supports the kids going to the nurse more often for the last, like, you know, year and a half or 2 years, like hopefully it would support, you know, I know I'm sure a lot more kids are going to the nurse this year, but if the data from last year kind of matches this year, that would show that it's not just due to, you know, the current situation that we're in for kids in school.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll take a look at all that kind of data points and make some assumptions and you know, potential cost implications and savings, and see if we can kind of weave together a more compelling story that we can present on the PowerPoint a little more succinctly. So,
Thank you.
all right. Those are the two big items, obviously, as you know. Let's move on. As you know, we have three classifications of employees. We have our non-union employees, our teachers who fall under the Seacoast Education Association collective bargaining agreement, and our educational associates who fall under the Seacoast Education Personnel Association collective bargaining agreement. So the two CBAs are contractual, that are based on warrant articles that passed in prior years. So for C, there's a 2.75% cost of living adjustment, and for CESPA, we have a 1% increase. For our non-union employees, what we do is benchmark the proposed COLA to the rate of inflation. So we base that on the consumer price index for the Portsmouth region for the prior year, July to July. So in this case, it's July 2019 to July 2020, which saw an inflation increase of a rate of inflation of 0.8%. So embedded in this budget is a 0.8% cost of living adjustment for our non-union employees, and then the 2.75 for teachers, certified staff, and 1% for our educational associates. Going into the each of the departments, we've outlined the significant increases or decreases for each budget function or department. So for regular education, we have a budget of $645,607, or an increase of $34,596, which is 5.66%. So this increase, as I alluded to earlier, as far as a budget driver, really revolves around the CBA for our teachers. So that's their cost of living adjustment, step increases. This also includes the math program. So this is the actual program, which I think we budgeted about $7,000 for. It does not include the professional development training that we had talked about earlier. That's later on in the budget. Those increases were offset slightly by a lower allocation of the ESOL teacher. So as you recall, last year we implemented this SAU-wide ESOL teacher who is allocated by district based on need, and Southampton's need decreased. So we saw a lower cost there. in addition to the savings that we recognize by just having an SAU-wide position as opposed to individual positions by district on a part-time basis. So special education is budgeted at $515,217. This is an increase of $41,153, which is 8.68%. As you know, this is primarily due to the out-of-district placement. This is offset by the elimination of the educational associate position, which we were able to eliminate with the addition of the guidance counselor, as well as the elimination of the home to school coordinator, again, absorbed by the guidance counselor position. Additionally, we have reductions in evaluations, testing, and professional services. And again, yep.
I had a couple questions there. So when we
Sure.
say out of district placement, I'm assuming that one gets caught in here. Yeah, it is. Where is that? Is that out of Barnard or out of SAU 21?
So both. So that would be as a student that's attending a school that we're tuitioning out. So this isn't like high school, Winnicott or Williamsbury. This is a school that services students with special needs, whether it's specific services or medical related, but that can be a significant cost.
Yep. And I know we can't talk about specifics of the student, but this appears to be someone who's gone from pre-K to moving in. So we'd expect these costs for the next 8-9 years, right? Is that a fair assumption?
Not necessarily.
Yeah,
Not necessarily.
We have to be careful about identifying students.
Yeah, I know, on a small scale, but yeah.
Right.
Okay.
But yeah, not necessarily. It could be a move-in, and depending on how they progress, the goal is always to bring them back if that's possible. Every student's different.
Yeah. Okay.
So.
Thank you. And then on the evaluations and testing, what's the change there?
We're contracting with a different psychologist whose rate is less.
Okay. That's good. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's always, with those type of professional services, we're always looking at, comparing rates, because we, especially across the SAU where we're looking at different firms and contractors. I know Aileen works with the other directors and with Caroline in order to get to identify contractors who not only provide good service, but at a reasonable rate. So thank you, Aileen. Student activities is budgeted at $13,300. This is a decrease of $1,000. So we under budgeted our extracurricular stipends with the assumption that we won't have every sport or activity. Historically, we haven't had every single one, so we're budgeting accordingly. Our guidance is budgeted at $71,205. So this was the robust conversation we had earlier, which is an increase of $56,791 with a focus on SCL. Our health is budgeted at $71,910, which is an increase of $4,371 or 6.47%. So this is our nurse and reflects the cost of living adjustment as well as step increase. And I think there's a track increase as well. Does everyone understand the difference between a step and a track? So a step is number of years. A track is education level. So if you ascertain a new degree or like 15 credits or 30 credits, you can advance a track, and that follows the salary schedule, and that's included in the CBA. The improvement of instruction budget is $6,835, which is a decrease of $1,241 or 15.37% reduction. This just reflects a decrease in our workshop seminars accounts. Our educational media budget is $182, which is a decrease of $19. So this is just to maintain that facilitation and maintenance of our library collection. Our technology account is budgeted at $46,334, or a decrease of $157. So this is a decrease in software licensing as well as salaries. And then we have that's slightly offset by an increase in our information access fees. So we upgraded to fiber. We previously had like essentially a home Comcast account to service the school, which was not sufficient already. But then when you add in all these new devices that we've invested in, it was woefully insignificant. So we were able, this was actually an SAU-wide initiative. And so the cost was, or the increase was rather minimal. Our Board of Education is budgeted at $19,195, or an increase of $392. And so this reflects an adjustment to the recording secretary stipend, as well as a reduction in our advertising costs. Our SAU services is budgeted at $61,519, which is an increase of $978, or 1.62%. So this reflects the, if you recall earlier this fall, we presented the SAU budget to the joint board. The joint board approved it, and then that is allocated to each individual school district budget. So, so this reflects SAU services, so the superintendent's office, financial services, HR, accounts payable, operations, and again, I just want to point out that you know, this reflects our new kind of proposed SAU model, where we're more of an aligned and single SAU, where we work a little more collaboratively. We look to achieve more efficiencies, you know, provide a structure that, you know, utilizes economies of scale, where we can share resources and personnel. For example, the ESOL position, some of these contracts when it comes to, excuse me, to the internet, to copiers, we're seeing savings. Energy, you know, we're having some significant savings in electricity. And then as far as like bus routes for special education, we've consolidated some of those routes to less of an impact on Southampton, because there are not that many out of district placements or transportation needs, but it does, when you can share special education routes, that can minimize costs. So those are some of the benefits, and I really want to emphasize how important, excuse me, how important it is for us to work as a single SAU, and really the benefits that we can derive from working together. Our school administration is budgeted at $136,135. This is an increase of $1,710. It just reflects the staff cost of living and step increases. Our buildings account is budgeted at $120,227. So this is an increase of $3,586. This reflects the staff cost of living adjustment and step increases. If you recall, last year we under budgeted by $5,000 based on our facility staff not necessarily working the full budgeted amount. We are seeing an improvement there, so we didn't cut it quite as much or under budget quite as much, because they're actually working more hours. We also had some slight increases in our supplies, you know, with the use of the electrostatic sprayers, those and the impetus was COVID. Those costs are significantly higher for those supplies. Not the sprayer, but the actual spray, whatever, the disinfectant. And that's something that will continue to, all of our other schools had used on a regular basis, and we'll continue to use. It's important, during flu season, and just as good practice. It's not a huge increase, but a slight increase, as well as insurance, and repair and maintenance. We saw some decreases, as I had mentioned earlier, electricity, and heating fuels, based on the negotiated rates at the SAU level. And we are proposing to defer some projects that we have identified a need for. So that includes LED lighting upgrades, which I will note is kind of that's one of those no-brainer projects. The return on investment is less than 3 years between rebates and cost savings on LED replacements. We do have some siding repairs that need to be done, as well as a playground shed roof. And then down the road, we're going to need to upgrade our fire alarm system, our arsenic water filter system, and the wheelchair lift. So those are being deferred. If there's a more immediate need, we could potentially look to utilize building expendable trust funds, but this obviously is not the year to bring forth any of those new projects. Our grounds budget is $12,330. So there's no increase budgeted in that account. Transportation is budgeted at $93,392, which is an increase of $14,193. This is primarily due to the out of district placement that we need to provide transportation for. And then we also have our normal increase as part of our contract with the first student, who supplies our regular education, athletic, field trip, and other transportation services. And this will be the third year of a 5-year contract. Our employee benefits is budgeted at $499,545, which is an increase of $115,274, which is roughly half of the overall increase that we're proposing. And again, this reflects that retirement system increase, and then the increase in health insurance. So between those two items, there's we're seeing significant increases in costs. Our high school tuition is budgeted at $479,700. So this is a $17,198 reduction. So this reflects the addition of one high school student, but also we are factoring in the new reduced Winnicott tuition rate, which is now equal to Amesbury. We're also proposing that we under budget this account by $25,000. And that's with the intention of utilizing the tuition stabilization expendable trust if we can absorb it in the budget. So, for example, we under budgeted slightly this year, this account by $15,000, with the same caveat. I am hopeful that we'll be able to absorb it in the budget this year. Michelle's doing a great job managing the budget, so I'm fully confident that we don't need to go to the trust due to her hard work. But again, if needed, this is a good way to under budget a little bit, and then we can utilize that trust. Any questions in regard to that item? That's pretty straightforward.
I was just trying to think back. So when we ran the projections last year, it showed that we get a spike this year, right? If I recall, was that right or no?
More of a spike because the actuals this past year came in a little lower. So if you look at our expenditure report this year, it's actually lower. We're under budget this current year. So some of these kids that we thought were going to Amesbury or Winnicott ended up going to private, or they moved out of district or dropped out. So it's for whatever reason we lost them. So,
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
so, but yeah, you're right, because it was a larger class size. We've been fairly, knock on wood, fortunate with how the high school students have turned out as far as enrollment. Our interfund transfer is $1. So typically, we don't have a food service program, but other than milk, but if we had a food service program and we ran a deficit, the general fund would have to fund that deficit. That's not the case here because we don't provide meals. And similarly, the food service budget is $1,305, which is for our milk. So that brings us to the default budget, which is $63,538 less than the proposed operating budget. So the default is $2,730,402. And just a reminder, and I know I've said this in the past, but the default is so we propose an operating budget at ballot. If the operating budget fails, then we go to the default budget. And the default budget is based on the prior year's budget plus or minus, so it's either reduced or increased based on any contractual amounts or any debt service, legally mandated items. And then it's also reduced by any one-time expenditures. And it's reduced by any eliminations of positions. So that's how the default, in a nutshell, there's some idiosyncrasies that I'm not going to go into detail about, but that's generally how you determine the default budget. And this is an important factor when we're looking at proposing a budget because where our proposed budget stands in relation to the default budget may determine how our community members vote. So for example, at $63,000, if we went to a default budget, we would have to, that's essentially the guidance position. So, we could propose this budget and essentially give the community the opportunity to make that decision. It's essentially, it's a referendum on the guidance counselor position. So they can decide, do they want a guidance counselor position? Do they want to pursue this initiative and investment in social emotional learning or not? That's one way to look at it. Obviously, it's not the only way to look at it. But that would likely be the reduction because there's nowhere else to cut if it went to default. And that would be the school. If we went to default, it would be the school board's decision they would be responsible for making a new budget based on that 2.73 number. So we would redo the entire budget based on that $2,730,402. And based on what we know, we'd likely be reducing the guidance counselor position if that occurred. So moving on. So every year we typically have warrant articles. We have a number of expendable trusts in Southampton. With a 9.98% proposed increase and with current economic conditions, we are not recommending to fund any of our expendable trusts. To put it in perspective, last year, we funded the roof at $15,000, the tuition stabilization fund at $10,000, the special education expendable trust at $15,000, and the building maintenance expendable trust at $20,000. So that's 30, 40, 50, that's $60,000 that we won't be asking for. And that being said, I think we are all painfully aware of the issues that our gymnasium roof, that we were dealing with the gymnasium roof. So we are proposing that we bring forth a warrant article to replace the gymnasium roof. We have a solid number in the November board meeting. We brought forth an RFP for award of bid for that project, which came in at $98,828. We're not required to go forward with that. That is contingent upon it being included in the budget as a warrant article, and it's contingent upon the voters passing it. So what we are suggesting is essentially depleting the roof expendable trust, which is, it's about 60. So it's actually $62,746. So we bring that balance down to $500 just to keep that trust open. So utilize that $62,000 and then ask for a warrant article of $36,582 from the community to pay for this gymnasium roof. We all know it's leaking. We've not been able to repair. We have repairs every year. It doesn't fix the problem. It needs to be replaced. Any questions in regard to the roof?
No, we've highlighted this as something coming this year.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking to the budget committee and the community about this for a number of years. So I don't think there's going to be any surprises. And anyone that plays basketball or uses that gymnasium knows the issues that we have.
Plus, it's a classroom now. So
right. So I just wanted to. So we've included the balances of the expendable trust just for informational purposes. And that brings us to the end of the budget. So if we want, we have the budget worksheets. We can go to any page that you're interested in or answer any questions that you may have at this point.
Was any consideration given to using some of the special education trust to offset those costs this year? Or do we just not think it's at a high enough number to consider that?
So we could potentially use it this current budget year because this year they were unanticipated.
Okay.
But next year, so for 21-22, this budget that we're proposing, we can't budget for an unanticipated cost. We know these costs. So it's a little different than like a building maintenance trust where we can use it for any building project. For special education, it needs to be unanticipated. So we may have unanticipated costs next year. We likely will, but that would be on top of what we already know. And that we could only utilize the trust for those unanticipated costs.
Okay.
Matt, can you say that again? So you have to have had something that was not anticipated to use that, right?
Yeah, so for example, this year we had a unanticipated out of district placement. So we could conceivably utilize the trust this current school year to pay for those overages. Now, next year, we know that our district placement is going to be there next year. We're budgeting for it, but we can't claim that that's unanticipated because we already know. So we can't withdraw from the expendable trust.
Okay.
So it's not like the tuition one, Becky, where we could use it.
Yeah, the other
Use
ones,
it that way. Yeah.
all the other expendable trusts, there's more leeway, but with special education, it's the way it's worded, it's unanticipated. Nancy, that's accurate, right? That I know most of our districts it says unanticipated. That's correct, right, Nancy?
Yes, I believe so. I'm going to double check the wording, but I believe you're correct. It's only special ed that's
I'm
unanticipated.
99% sure all the special education expendable trusts are worded as unanticipated. All the other trusts, it can be planned, so it's okay. So the roof, for example, that's not unanticipated. We know, but we set up that roof specifically, that expendable trust specifically to replace roofs.
Okay. So, and needing this school counselor more, that's anticipated? That's like something that we know?
Well, that's anticipated, but it's also not technically in the special
It would
education
not qualify.
budget, so it
Okay.
wouldn't qualify as a special education
Okay.
cost. So, and we know it. So,
Okay. Thank you.
you're welcome.
And so the thought process, so on the warrant article side of things, I mean, there's certain kinds which are, direct appropriations, and the other are if we have excess in the budget, right? So the thought process is, if we come in lower, just to give it back to the town.
Yeah, so yeah, you're right. So some is raise and appropriate, which is immediate, like that's taxed, and then there are some that are funded by unreserved fund balance, which is any unexpended funds at the end of the year. So it's a little delayed, but it still affects the tax rate because it's in effect we're not returning as much money to the town to offset assessment. So it's a delay, but it still affects everyone's tax rates. And we just felt that given this year that that this was the right thing to do, the most, as far as not bringing forth any of those trusts. So I mean,
And that's typically been the sped and building maintenance funds, right?
yeah, I mean, we've been like last year we did special education, buildings, tuition, and a roof. So,
Okay.
so we had 4 last year, and that was about 60,000. That was $60,000. 2 were unreserved fund balance, which was 35,000. That was special education and buildings, and then 2, the roof and tuition, were raise and appropriate, and that was 25,000 total.
Okay.
So, and we're this year we're asking for 36,000 raise and appropriate for the roof.
So if we're going to use all that money in the building, except for the 500, how do you think we're going to get that built back up? Like
Well, we're maintaining the building trust. We're going to use the roof.
roofing. Sorry, roof. Okay, so then we don't really need to have that anymore, correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's advisable to slowly down the road build that up again, but we don't have any immediate roof concerns after this gymnasium. We just replaced the roof on the old section of the school last year, and then we have the gymnasium, and then it's the new section. So I think I'd have to take a look at kind of the age of that roof, but I think we have a number of years before we have any roofing project to undertake after the gymnasium.
Okay.
So that's why we want to keep it open, and then down the road start to build it up for the next roofing project. But there's no like short term or even the next 5 years need for a roof. So we're pretty comfortable bringing that down to 500. Now, Jim, to your point, I mean, I mean, we feel strongly that we want that full-time position, but if the community or the budget committee feels like a compromise is necessary, there is that option to bring it down to a 0.8. That's only a $15,000 decrease, so that brings us down to like 9.4%. So I don't think it's worth it for us. Like, I think we should go forth with the 1.0, but that is an option down the road if there's really opposition to the position.
Yeah, I think that that's a good point to make, and I think we just need to make sure have a robust case. I mean, basically, as you said before, that's the difference between the default budget and the proposed budget. So you can make an argument that, just put it in the voters' hands, which is kind of what you said. But I think it's important just to not get a negative connotation in within the community as to the reason behind it.
Yeah.
Like anytime you
Yeah, I think-
scale up to a full-time position, that's not directly attributable to like an in-classroom teacher, I feel like people ask questions about that in a school our size. So not to say it's the wrong decision, Michelle, it's just saying it's that, it's a big portion of the, the school's about 2/3 of our overall town budget. So certain people pay attention.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we understand. I mean, and there's challenges with this budget. So I completely understand. It's, we had a significant conversation about this topic leading up to, during the development of the budget. And I think it's really a testament to how important this is that, we are bringing it forth. So,
Yeah.
because I think you can tell how much care we took to reduce elsewhere. So.
Is the guidance counselor aware of that the position is going to go to full-time?
I haven't told her yet, but she will know eventually that.
So is there a risk in that person not holding that position or, taking it or leaving it due to the fact that now it's full-time or now you're not offering me full-time?
I think there's absolutely a risk of losing the person if it doesn't go to a full-time position. But I think so once the school board, if the school board, assuming the school board approves this proposed budget, at that point Michelle will convey the school board approved budget to her staff, and have that conversation with that individual, to let them know that that's what we're proposing. Obviously, there's no guarantees, but that's what we're asking for. So.
Just had a couple others as I'm looking through this. So on page 103, which is the health care increase. I'm just looking at this. So I'm trying to get an idea of how much of that is just the kind of year-over-year increase, and then how much of it is election based. So 64,000 difference.
Yeah, it's a little. Let me just pull it up.
Not that we have any control. I just want to understand the number.
Yeah, it's a little messy. So 10,000 of it, about 10,000 is the guidance counselor. So take that right off the bat. So that comes down to about $53,000 differential. Embedded in it is 3.4%. I don't know how many changes there were. Nancy, do you have any idea how much of that was changes to plans?
I think Nancy logged off the meeting.
Oh.
Yeah, and you don't need to get it to me now, Matt. I mean, maybe just like a breakdown of what's the cost and year-over-year cost inflation and how much was change in plan.
Yeah.
I think it'd just be helpful to know that. Not that it matters, but I think it's just helpful sometimes it's helpful to know.
Although Matt, is that provided on that Excel spreadsheet? Doesn't it show like previous year's expenses?
Yeah, no, but it's doesn't. What Jim's asking for is how much of it's the GMR, so the rate increase, which is 3.4%, and how much of it is people changing their plans. So it just gets messy. I have a feeling that it's primarily, because 3.4% isn't a big increase at all.
Yeah.
I think it's the plan changes, and I think that because of the amount, but also we're over budget in this year's budget on health insurance. So if you look at the expenditure report, I think we're over by about $30,000. So that would be so right off the bat, that's $30,000 in plan changes that would be reflected in this budget.
Yeah. So, just when I look at the Excel spreadsheet, like you have 2017, 18, you're kind of really just over 100 grand, and then it jumped up to like 150, now 204. Like that's obviously somebody's
All
gonna
it
ask a
takes-
question there. I know, and all it takes is a little bit, but I just want to be sharp on it
Yeah.
when people ask the question.
Yeah, because conceivably one plan, you could go for someone that's waiving their plan to a family plan, and that's 25 grand right there. So I'll delve into those numbers and get the breakdown, but I think it's primarily plan changes. So
Okay, and then the other big one in there is going to be the retirement. I understand that's completely out of our control. Just so I can understand expectations, though, that it looks like that number is going to be on the high, in this range moving forward. Is that fair to say?
So they typically adjust the retirement rate every 3 years. Now, I can't guarantee that that's going to be the case, but typically it's a 3-year cycle. Now, it's not typically 3%. Usually it's like 0.05% or something. But so for the next 3 years, or for the next 2-year budgets after this, I anticipate the rate to remain the same.
Okay. Yeah, so we'll be
Now
up in that 180
now that
range.
number could change. That's going to go up because salaries go up, and it's a percentage of it, but the percentage will be the same.
Yeah. Okay.
I hope.
Yeah.
Don't hold me to the state because they're sometimes unpredictable.
Yeah. Well, low interest rates actually drive those numbers up. That's just how it works. Okay.
Right.
Did we? I don't know if I missed it or not, but maybe not. Did we talk about what potentially we may be giving back to the town this year?
We have not. It's still a little early.
Okay.
Usually we don't. We wouldn't look at that until more the spring time frame.
Just thought maybe with the huge jump in the special ed, they might maybe like to have a little idea of what they could maybe get back.
They're not getting much back. I can tell you that right now because, I mean, we're really early, but already there's not much left. I mean, we're tight. I mean, I think we're all aware how tight this budget is. There's no excess here, so we're not going to be returning much to the town this year. So.
Okay.
I
Thank
mean,
you.
to put it in perspective, Becky, I think we're looking at like a 7 to 8% increase, and townwide, based on the numbers that I've kind of seen.
Okay.
Maybe even higher, actually. So that's why I just said it's going to be.
Yeah, it's gonna be tough.
They're going to just the fact that this is a big budget increase already. It's like you're seeing that across the board. So you can argue that's good or bad, right? Because, but clearly,
Jim, I'm sorry. Did you say the town their proposed budget is like 7 or 8% this year as well for 21, 22?
yeah, I'm just reading through some emails I got a couple weeks ago. It's, I mean, maybe even higher. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's up there. So like we're seeing a pretty big increase. I mean, I know they're seeing a big increase across the board. So, I mean, you say that's a good, meaning this is comparable is one way to look at it. The negative of that is this is tends to be a big driver. So that I don't think they're aware of the potential increase for 21, 22. So
they're facing some of the same challenges we are. That being said, I know Dennis, in an ideal world, he's looking at an 8% increase total, town and school. So this certainly does not align with. That's a perfect world, and that's kind of his benchmark. He likes.
Well, I'm guessing, yeah, with the retirement funding, and they're gonna get hit. I mean,
they have the same retirement issues. And then who knows what type of health insurance increases they have.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay. We actually went through most of the page items. We talked about it specifically, so I'm okay there. Becky and Sharon.
I'm good.
I'm good too, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think the main take, I'm comfortable with this. I just want to flush out the presentation of the guidance counselor specifically.
So yeah, so we'll go back to the drawing board and work on the guidance counselor presentation. I'll also get that health insurance breakdown for you. And at this point, we would be for the board to vote on the operating budget and the warrant article. Unless there are any more questions.
Yeah, I'm comfortable voting on those. Sharon and Becky, are you? I'm just
Yeah, I am as well.
Yep.
okay. All right, let's bring up board docs here. So we do them. We're gonna do these separately, right? Or is it part of the?
Separately is preferable.
Yep. So can I get a motion to approve the 2021-22 operating budget and the amount presented?
I'll make a motion to approve the 2021-2022 operating budget as presented.
Second.
Jim Keim,
Yes.
Becky Burdick,
Yes.
and Sharon Gordon.
Yes.
Okay. And I'm just
All
going
right.
to say as presented.
Yeah, I didn't look up the specific number.
Okay.
And then, so I had a question on just how this is worded. It says motion to approve, just in board docs, a warrant article for the gym roof replacement in the amount of $98,828.
We can edit that.
Yeah, it should be the 36.
All right, let me pull that back up.
Find that amount and I will put that in there.
It's 36,582.
All right. So can I get a motion to approve?
And make a motion to approve a warrant article for the gym roof replacement in the amount of $36,582.
A second.
Jim Keim,
Yes.
Becky Burdick,
Yes.
and Sharon Gordon.
Yes.
I have that recorded.
Can I ask a question? Not about any of the budget or anything like that, but so is Bill still on?
He's still logged in, but his camera and microphone are shut off. I don't know if he's still has this pulled up or not.
Just curious to see how the new the communication is with the new superintendent at the high school. Does he see a difference of anything with her maybe giving some more information?
Talking about Amesbury, right?
Yeah, at
It
Amesbury.
is very.
Just curious.
Yeah, I hate to speak for Bill, but I think there's not been a tremendous amount of communication.
Okay.
I think Amesbury's dealing with some issues currently that they're focused on.
Yeah.
So we continue, that's something we try to foster is a good working relationship with them, but there's been a fair amount of turmoil over there. So.
I've been in touch with the principal, the acting principal.
Oh, good.
Briefly.
The acting principal, but not the superintendent?
No.
So that's Richie, right? Danielle Richie?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, all right. Thank you.
Right. All right. Well, I think that brings us to the end. We have no reason for non-public, correct?
No.
All right. So can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Make a motion to adjourn. at 11, I can't see.
11:19.
Second.
All right, I think we can do show of hands for
Yeah.
voting. We don't need a roll call for this one.
And
All right,
because
thank
you
you.
guys have done everything, I'll remove the meeting that we held for next week for a budget. So I'll just remove that off the calendar.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you. Thank
you
you, everybody, for putting
for
this together.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.